Some Jews fear the level of intolerance they're experiencing is reminiscent of that preceding the Holocaust in the 1930s. And that's not to mention discrimination coming from Muslim majority countries. And to help us understand what's going on, I'm joined by USERF Commissioner Gary Bauer. Gary, give us a sense, what is the reality for Jews today in Europe and around the world?
Well, the story, I'm afraid, is fairly bleak. Anti-Semitism is like a coronavirus of the heart and soul. It just seems to be able to mutate. It pops up everywhere in every century, and it seems to go in waves. And unfortunately, we're experiencing one of those waves now. Even if you put the Middle East aside, we're also seeing in Europe, in the European Union and in Great Britain, higher rates of anti-Semitism, both on the progressive left and on some far-right political parties. So sadly, in one country after another, including in some cases here in the United States, anti-Semitism is growing.
How is the pandemic affecting anti-Semitism? Are Jews feeling more pressure?
What we're seeing right now in the Islamic world in the Middle East is disgusting. In some bizarre way, Jews are being blamed for the coronavirus. We see not only radical groups in the Middle East blaming Jews, but even journalists in countries like Jordan suggesting that the virus was made in an Israeli lab or made by Jewish scientists and that they've unleashed it to kill Muslims. So we do see something like the virus being exploited and causing the anti-Semitism to be worse.
Well, your colleague at USERF, Chairman Tony Perkins, calls anti-Semitism the canary in the coal mine. And he says that this is an early warning sign of coming persecution or worsening persecution for all faiths. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I do, and history proves it. When a country goes down the road to anti-Semitism, it never ends there. It almost always inevitably then spreads to go after other minority groups, whether it's Christians or other groups that might be despised for one reason or another. And you know, I've noticed, and this I think is very significant right now in the Middle East, there's an effort underway to prove by anti-Semites that Jews never lived in the Holy Land, that the whole thing is a fable, it's a lie that's been made up so that Jews could colonize the land that we call Israel. Well, look, if Jews never lived in the Holy Land, then Christians never existed in the Holy Land. If Jews weren't there, our entire gospel is wrong. So you can see how the attacks on Jews in the Holy Land very quickly morph into attacks on Christians too. So it's imperative in the 21st century that every nation do everything it can to fight anti-Semitism. It's bad enough on its own, but it leads to even greater horrors down the road.
What does USERF recommend that countries be doing to fight this?
Well, there are a number of things. You know, the United States is fortunate to have created a new position in the federal government, a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism. That gentleman's name here in the United States is Ilan Carr, and he testified on a hearing we had in Capitol Hill that Iran is one of the greatest traffickers of anti-Semitism, which we point out in our report. But we're also recommending that other countries around the world create their own special envoys who have no other responsibility other than combating anti-Semitism. We're also urging countries, particularly in Europe, to do more about educating their young people about the Holocaust. It's been really frightening and discouraging to see young people in countries like France and Belgium, even in Great Britain, having very little knowledge about the Holocaust. And if we don't learn from history, as has been said many times, we'll be doomed to repeat it.
Absolutely. Are you seeing any indications that countries are willing or eager to address this?
Yes, particularly in the European Union, we're seeing countries that are very aware about how anti-Semitic acts have gone up dramatically in France and Germany and Belgium and other countries, and they're beginning to try to address that. There is a new effort to reintroduce Holocaust education into the classroom, and one of our recommendations is that the United States work with law enforcement agencies in other countries, particularly in Europe, to reform the hate crime laws so that we can have some degree of confidence that all the increase in anti-Semitism is being accurately measured. We find in some of these countries, Jews will often suffer anti-Semitic attacks, but because they're frustrated that the authorities don't take them seriously, they don't actually report them. So it's important that law enforcement in these countries do more to make sure that victims are willing to speak up.
Absolutely. Well, this is certainly an issue for us to be following. And Commissioner Bauer, we thank you so much for your time.
Great to be with you as always.